Hey, my name is Jace. I'm 25 and I just moved into this small house on the edge of a quiet suburb outside Seattle about 6 months ago. It wasn't some big life plan or anything. My ex Sarah decided after 3 years that I wasn't stable enough for the future she wanted. She packed her bags one rainy Tuesday, left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I need more." And that was it. No screaming, no dramatic fight. Just gone. I didn't even try to stop her. Maybe I was too tired, or maybe I knew deep down she was right. My job as a freelance interior designer keeps the bills paid, but it's not exactly a 9 to 5 with benefits. I work from home, sketching 3D renders on my laptop until 2 a.m., answering client emails that come in at weird hours because they're on the East Coast or in Europe. The house is modest. One story, two bedrooms, a tiny backyard that's mostly dirt and weeds. No pets, no plants. I told myself I wanted simple, quiet. The neighborhood is the kind where people wave from their porches but don't really know each other's names. Lawns are trimmed, driveways clean, and everyone seems to have a routine. Across the street lives this woman, Claire. I think she's around 40, maybe a little older. Dark hair usually tied up in a loose bun, sharp eyes that don't miss much, but there's a warmth there too, like she's seen a lot but hasn't let it harden her completely. She wears these flowy linen shirts and jeans, always barefoot in her yard or on her porch. Her house is the opposite of mine, full of life, flowers everywhere, roses climbing the fence, pots of herbs on the steps, a little garden out back that I can see from my window. She's got this gray cat that's fat and fluffy, always wandering around like it owns the block. I never talked to her much at first, just a nod here and there when I'd grab the mail or take out the trash. That all changed one morning in early spring. I woke up around 7 a.m. That all changed one morning in early spring. I woke up around 7 a.m. Unusual for me since I usually crash after pulling an all-nighter on a project. But something felt off. I shuffled to the kitchen, made coffee, and glanced out the front window. My yard looked like a war zone. The bag of potting soil I'd bought on a whim months ago. Thinking maybe I'd plant anything to make the place feel less empty, was ripped open. Dirt scattered everywhere, clumps of it smeared across the porch steps, wet and muddy from the overnight drizzle. Paw prints, small but clear, leading right across the street to Claire's house. I stood there in my sweatpants, coffee in hand, staring at the mess. That cat. It had to be. I'd seen it prowling around before, but never thought it'd cause this kind of damage. I wasn't mad exactly, more annoyed. I had a client deadline, and now I had to clean this up. Without thinking too much, I slipped on shoes, crossed the street, and knocked on her door. The cat was sitting on her porch steps, licking its paw like nothing happened. Innocent as hell. The door opened a crack at first, then wider. Claire was there, hair in that bun, wearing a loose beige linen shirt and shorts, barefoot as usual. She had a mug in her hand, steam rising from it. Tea, probably. She looked at me, eyebrows raised, not unfriendly but curious. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "Your cat. It tore up my yard. The potting soil out front, it's everywhere." She glanced past me at the mess, then back at the cat, who was now stretching lazily. A small smile tugged at her lips. "You're accusing an innocent animal of vandalism." "Innocent, look at the prints. They lead right here." She stepped out onto the porch, crossing her arms. "Cats dig. It's what they do. Maybe it was a raccoon, or the wind. You can't just blame Smokey without proof." "Smokey, that's its name." She nodded, scratching the cat behind the ears. It purred like a motor. "He's been with me for years. Harmless." We went back and forth like that for a minute. Me pointing out the evidence, her defending the cat with this half-amused, half-challenging tone. It wasn't heated, but there was a spark. Something in the way she argued. Confident, quick, but not mean. Finally, she leaned against the doorframe, sipping her tea. "Tell you what," she said, eyes narrowing playfully. "If you can prove it was Smokey, I'll admit defeat. And to make it interesting, if I'm wrong, I'll live in your house for 60 days. Help clean up the mess I supposedly caused. But if you're wrong, you have to replant my entire flower garden. The one out back that's been neglected since winter." I laughed. It was ridiculous, absurd. But there was something about her challenge that pulled me in. Maybe it was the boredom of my routine or the leftover sting from Sarah leaving, or just the way Claire looked at me, like she saw right through the tired guy in sweatpants. "Deal," I said, extending my hand. She shook it. Firm grip, warm skin. Her eyes held mine a second longer than necessary. The next day, I set up my old security camera, the one I'd bought after a package went missing last year, aimed it right at the yard. That night, I stayed up late working but kept an eye on the feed. Sure enough, around 2 a.m., there was Smokey, waddling over, sniffing the soil bag, then digging in like it was his personal playground. I recorded it all, saved the clip. Morning came. I burned it to a USB, walked across the street, and knocked again. Claire answered in a robe, this time hair down, looking like she'd just woken up. I handed her the drive without a word. She plugged it into her laptop in the kitchen. We watched in silence. Smokey in full glory, dirt flying. When it ended, she closed the laptop slowly, looked at me for a long moment. No apology, no laugh. Just a quiet nod. "Fair's fair," she said finally. I thought that was it. She'd pay for new soil or something, but the day after that there was a knock at my door. Early. Too early for me. I opened it, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Claire stood there with a small suitcase in one hand and Smokey in a carrier in the other. "I'm a woman of my word," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. 60 days starts now." Claire moved in like she'd done it 100 times before. One small suitcase, a canvas tote with a jar of homemade strawberry jam, and Smokey and his carrier meowing complaints the whole way. She didn't ask where to put things. She just observed the house for 30 seconds, nodded once, and claimed the spare room at the end of the hall. The one I'd been using as storage for old sketch pads and a broken floor lamp. By noon, the junk was stacked neatly in the garage. The bed was made with her own sheet, soft gray linen, and Smokey had already claimed the windowsill. I gave her a key, a single brass one on a plain ring, one on a plain. She turned it over in her palm, raised an eyebrow. "Trusting," she said. 60 days, I reminded her. House rules are simple. Don't touch my coffee beans, don't move my drafting table. And if Smokey scratches the couch, we're having words. She smiled, slipped the key onto a thin silver chain around her neck, and tucked it under her shirt. Noted. The first morning was a collision of routines. I stumbled out at 10:15, hair a mess, laptop under my arm, hunting for caffeine. Claire was already up barefoot at the stove, flipping almond butter toast in a cast iron skillet that definitely wasn't mine. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and something citrusy. A kettle whistled softly on the back burner. "Coffee's in the French press," she said without turning. "But I made tea if you want to try something that doesn't taste like regret." I poured coffee anyway, black 2 sugars. She slid a plate across the counter, toast, a smear of her jam, a sliced pear arranged like it belonged in a magazine. I stared at it. My usual breakfast was cold pizza or nothing. "Eat," she said. "Freelancers still need fuel." I took a bite. The jam was stupidly good. Sweet, bright, with a hint of rosemary I couldn't place. I hated that I liked it. Days 2 through 10 were a quiet negotiation. She woke at 6, opened windows, let the morning air in. I worked until 3, headphones on, ignoring the sunlight. She used the left side of the sink. I took the right. She folded towels into perfect squares. I left mine draped over the shower rod. The first real argument was over salt. I was reheating leftover Thai takeout. She watched me shake the shaker like it owed me money. "That's not seasoning," she said. "That's a cry for help. Some of us like flavor. Some of us like blood pressure under 200. I put the shaker down. She handed me a tiny dish of coarse sea salt and a spoon. Pinch. Not avalanche. I used the spoon. She didn't gloat. Much. We developed unspoken boundaries. My drafting table stayed sacred. She never moved the Wacom pen. Her gardening gloves hung on a hook by the back door. I never touched them. Smokey became the neutral ambassador, curling on whichever lap was available. The cat didn't care whose rules we followed. Evenings were trickier. I'd finish a render stretch, realize it was 8 p.m., and the house smelled like garlic and herbs. Claire cooked without announcement. First night, pan-seared salmon, roasted asparagus, a glass of white wine she poured for herself, and then, after a pause, one for me. We ate at the small table by the window, no music, Just forks and the occasional meow from Smokey begging for fish. You don't have to feed me, I said. Nobody should eat alone 5 nights a week, she replied. Even if it's just fish, I didn't argue. The second week she discovered my pizza habit. I came home to find the box from 2 nights ago still on the counter. She held it up like evidence. This is a biohazard, it's fine. It's growing a civilization. She tossed it, wiped the counter, and 10 minutes later handed me a bowl of pasta with tomatoes that actually tasted like summer. I ate 2 servings and pretended it was normal. We argued about music next. She played jazz in the mornings, soft saxophone brushed drums. I played lo-fi hip-hop beats at night. One evening our playlists collided in the living room. The speakers glitched, layering Billie Holiday over a trap beat. We both reached for the remote at the same time. Our fingers brushed. Neither of us moved for a second. Truce, she asked. Alternate days, I said. Deal. By day 15, the house felt different. My coffee mug migrated to the dish rack beside her teacup. Her gardening clogs appeared by the front door next to my sneakers. The fridge held 2 kinds of milk. Almond for her, whole for me. 2 sugar jars, white for me, raw, turbinado for her. The bathroom mirror had 2 toothbrushes in the same cup. I told myself it was temporary. 60 days. A bet. Nothing more. One night I came in late, rain-soaked, from a client meeting downtown. The porch light was on, so was the lamp in the living room. Claire was on the couch legs tucked under her reading a book about heirloom roses. Smokey asleep on the armrest. She looked up when I dripped on the mat. Towels on the dryer, she said. And there's soup if you're hungry. I stood there, water puddling at my feet, realizing I hadn't turned on the porch light when I left. She had. I ate the soup standing at the counter. Carrot ginger spicy enough to warm me from the inside. She didn't say anything else, just turned a page, but the light stayed on until I went to bed. The shift happened without a calendar mark somewhere between day 20 and day 30. I stopped noticing the countdown. Claire stopped packing her toothbrush back into the suitcase every night. We just lived. Morning softened. I'd wake to the low hum of the kettle and the scent of bergamot drifting down the hall. Some days I'd shuffle out in boxers and a t-shirt. She'd be at the counter in an oversized sweater, hair still damp from the shower, slicing fruit like it was the most natural thing in the world. We didn't speak much before 9, but the silence wasn't awkward anymore. Smokey would weave between our ankles, demanding breakfast in 2 different pitches, one for Claire's scrambled eggs, one for my cereal milk. I started coming home earlier. Not because deadlines loosened, because the porch light was on, because the kitchen window glowed gold against the dusk, because I knew there'd be a plate waiting, or at least the offer of one. Claire never asked where I'd been. She just slid a mug across the counter to over her coffee for me and went back to chopping whatever vegetable was in season. We fell into chores without discussion. I'd mow the strip of lawn between our houses on Saturdays. She'd deadhead the roses while I worked. I'd haul her heavy ceramic pots to the patio. She'd hold the door when I carried in grocery bags. One afternoon I found her on a stepladder painting the back fence a soft sage. I took the brush without a word, finished the top half she couldn't reach. She handed me a cold beer when we were done. We drank on the steps backs against the warm wood, watching Smokey chase a butterfly that had no intention of being caught. Cooking became a duet. She'd sear chicken. I'd make the rice. I'd burn garlic bread. She'd salvage it with honey butter. We discovered I could chop onions faster than she could, and she could taste a sauce and name every herb in it. The kitchen radio flipped between her jazz and my lo-fi. Sometimes we let them overlap and called it fusion. One night we attempted risotto. It took 2 hours, 3 glasses of wine, and one near disaster with the stove, but we ate it straight from the pan, leaning against opposite counters, laughing at the smoke alarm that never quite went off. I learned she kept a blog anonymous, password protected, about flowers and memory. Posts at 2 a.m. about how lavender smells like her grandmother's funeral, how marigolds remind her of hospital corridors. The writing was spare, beautiful, nothing like the confident woman who argued about salt. I read one entry on my phone while she showered, felt like an intruder, and never told her. She learned I still sketched by hand before committing to digital renders. Found a napkin in the trash with a floor plan, doodled in ballpoint. The next day, a fresh sketchbook appeared on my drafting table, no note. I used it that night. Drew her garden from memory every petal, every cracked pot. Left the page open. She never mentioned it, but the book migrated to the living room shelf beside her botany texts. Rainy afternoons became ritual. Seattle obliged. We'd lose power every other week. Claire kept beeswax candles in a tin by the fireplace. I'd build a fire with the last of the Home Depot logs. We'd push the coffee table aside, drag cushions to the rug, and sit cross-legged under flickering light. Smokey wedged between us like a furry referee. One storm the thunder cracked so loud the windows rattled. Claire flinched just once. I pretended not to notice. She poured us whiskey in teacups because the glasses were in the dishwasher. I used to be terrified of the dark, she said, staring at the flames. After my husband left, the house felt too big. Every shadow was a reminder. I nodded. I used to check my phone every 5 minutes after Sarah, waiting for a text that never came. Silence was worse than screaming. She turned the cup in her hands. And now I hate sleeping alone, I admitted. The words hung there heavier than the rain. She didn't fill the quiet, just reached over, rested her hand on my knee for 3 heartbeats, then withdrew. The fire popped. Smokey purred. Outside, water drummed the gutters in steady rhythm. Another evening, no storm. Just dusk settling purple over the backyard. I was on the porch patching a leak in the gutter. She was repotting basil on the steps. My phone buzzed a client emergency. I cursed, climbed down, hands black with old leaves. Claire met me with a wet rag, wiped my fingers without asking. The cloth smelled like lemon and dish soap. You missed a spot, she said, tapping my wrist. I looked at her, really looked. The porch light caught the fine lines beside her eyes, the way her hair curled damp at the temples from the humidity. Something in my chest shifted. Not dramatic, just a quiet click like a door I hadn't known was locked, suddenly swinging open. Later inside, we made grilled cheese with the good cheddar. Ate on the couch, feet propped on the coffee table, some old movie neither of us watched. Halfway through, the power flickered but held. Claire leaned her head against the cushion, eyes half closed. 60 days is a weird length, she murmured. Yeah, I said. Long enough to form habits. She didn't reply, just nudged Smokey off her lap so she could stretch out. Her toes brushed my thigh, accidental maybe. Neither of us moved away. The next morning, I woke to find my favorite mug, the chipped blue one filled with tea instead of coffee. A note in her handwriting, try it. 1 sugar, like you. I drank it black anyway, but I smiled into the steam. The scars showed up on a Tuesday that started ordinary and ended anything but. I was in the kitchen hunting for the good scissors when Claire reached for a high shelf in the pantry. Her sleeve rode up, revealing a pale, jagged line that ran from mid-forearm to the crook of her elbow. It looked surgical, old, but deliberate. I froze, scissors half open. She noticed, tugged the sleeve down, and kept reaching for the brown sugar like nothing happened. I didn't ask. Not then. The next morning, I found her in the backyard at dawn, kneeling in the dirt, repotting a drooping hydrangea. Her sleeves were pushed to the elbows again. The scar caught the early light. I crouched beside her with coffee, pretending to inspect the roots. Transplant shock, I said. Some things don't travel well, she answered, not looking up. I rolled up my own sleeve without thinking, showed her the puckered burn on my inner wrist, motorcycle exhaust, age 19, stupid bet with friends. Still stings in cold water, I offered. She studied it, then traced the hydrangea's wilted leaf with a muddy finger. Pain's a lousy souvenir, but it proves you were somewhere. That night we cooked together, her idea risotto again, but with mushrooms she'd foraged from the woods behind the house. I stirred. She added stock ladle by ladle. The kitchen filled with steam and the low crackle of the stove. Smokey watched from the counter like a tiny supervisor. Halfway through, she asked, "You ever talk about her, Sarah? I tasted the rice-added salt." Not really. You, my ex, had a name for every silence. Called them pauses in the marriage. She laughed, but it came out brittle. The last pause lasted 6 months. Then he took the dog and left the crib we never used. I set the spoon down. I'm sorry, don't be. I kept the crib. Donated it last year. Took me that long to admit I wouldn't need it. The risotto was perfect. We ate at the table candles again because the overhead bulb had finally burned out and neither of us had replaced it. Between bites, she told me about the miscarriage at 20 weeks, the way the hospital smelled like bleach and lilies, how her husband couldn't look at her for weeks afterward. I told her about Sarah's last message. I can't wait for a future that might never start how I read it on the toilet at 3 a.m. and didn't cry until the next client call. We didn't fix each other. We just laid the broken pieces on the table like puzzle parts and let them sit. A few nights later, I woke to the sound of the front door. 2:17 a.m. Moonlight striped the hallway. Claire stood in the living room in an oversized sweatshirt staring at the blank TV screen. I padded out in boxers. Bad dream memory, she corrected. Sometimes they feel the same. I got her water, she drank half-handed it back. Our fingers brushed. This time, neither of us pretended it was accidental. I keep thinking the 60 days will end and I'll know what to do, she said. They don't have to. She looked at me, then really looked. The kind of look that strips paint. You don't know what you're offering. I know what I'm not offering, I said. I'm not asking you to leave. The next morning, I found her blog open on the kitchen laptop she'd forgotten to log out. A draft post titled, On Temporary Roots. It wasn't about flowers, it was about me the way I leave coffee rings on blueprints. How I hum off key when I think no one's listening. The scar on my wrist that looks like a lightning bolt. She'd written, he thinks 60 days is a bet. I think it might be a beginning I'm terrified to name. I closed the laptop before she came in. Didn't mention it. But I left a sketch on the counter, her hands in the garden dirt, under the nails, the scar, a faint silver thread. She found it at noon, folded it into her pocket without a word. That evening, we walked to the corner store for milk. The air smelled like cut grass and distant barbecue. Halfway back, she stopped under a street lamp. I used to think love had to be loud, she said. Fireworks, grand gestures. Then I lost everything that made noise. I shifted the grocery bag to my other hand. I thought love had to be permanent. A contract. Then I got left with a note. She took the bag from me, our fingers overlapping on the handles. Maybe it's just choosing to stay when you don't have to. We walked the rest of the way in silence. At the porch, she paused. Jace. Yeah, if I ask you to replace that burnt-out bulb tomorrow, will you? Only if you let me pick the wattage. She laughed, soft, surprised, real. The sound settled in my chest like warm whiskey. Later in the kitchen, she poured tea. I watched the steam curl between us. Cold, I asked. A little. I stepped closer, not touching, just close enough that our shadows merged on the cabinet. She didn't move away. The kettle clicked off. The house held its breath. The cold snap hit on day 52. Seattle turned brittle overnight. Frost on the windows, breath fogging in the kitchen. I came in from a client call downtown, cheeks numb, fingers stiff around a takeout coffee I'd forgotten to drink. Claire was at the stove, hair still damp from a shower, wearing one of my old flannel shirts over leggings. It swallowed her sleeves, rolled 4 times. She looked up when the door slammed. You're blue, she said, stirring something that smelled like cinnamon and orange. Feels like it. She set a mug on the counter, tea steaming. Drink before you freeze solid. I wrapped both hands around it, let the heat sink in. She went back to the stove. I watched the way the flannel shifted when she reached for the honey, the small scar on her forearm catching the light. My laptop sat open on the table, a half-finished render glowing. Deadline in 2 days. I should have been working. Instead, I said, if I stop now, I'll look at you. She didn't turn. Then look, I did. She kept stirring. The silence stretched thick and sweet. Finally, she faced me, spoon dripping. You're not working, I'm stuck. On the render, on everything. She set the spoon down, walked over and placed a second mug beside my laptop. Chamomile, no sugar. Then she sat on the edge of the table close enough that her knee brushed my arm. Tell me. I closed the laptop. I keep redesigning the same room. Can't get the light right. Feel temporary. She studied me. Nothing has to be permanent to be beautiful. I laughed under my breath. That's your blog talking, maybe. She nudged the mug toward me. Drink. I took a sip. It was perfect. We didn't speak for a while. Smokey jumped up, circled twice, settled between us like a furry bookmark. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season drifted past the window. Claire reached over, closed my laptop fully. Rest your eyes. I leaned back in the chair. She stayed on the table legs, swinging slightly. The flannel gaped at the collar. I caught a glimpse of freckles across her collarbone. I wanted to trace them like constellations. Instead, I said, Day 58 tomorrow. I know. No one's counting. I am, she said softly, but not for the reason you think. I looked up. Her eyes were steady, unguarded. What reason? She slid off the table, stood between my knees. Not touching. Just there. Because I stopped packing 3 weeks ago, my heart thudded once hard. The suitcase still in the closet. Empty. I swallowed. And if I said, I don't want you to fill it? She tilted her head. Then we'd need a new bet. Terms. If I lose, I stay. If you lose? She glanced at the window where snow had started to stick. You plant lavender in the spring. Enough for both yards. I stood. We were inches apart now. I want to lose. Her breath caught. Jace, I lifted a hand, hovered near her cheek, waited. She leaned in the smallest fraction. Permission. I brushed a damp strand of hair behind her ear. 60 days was never the bet, I said. No, she whispered. It was the excuse. She rested her forehead against mine. We stayed like that, no kiss, no rush, just breathing the same air. Smokey yawned, stretched, and flopped off the table, unimpressed. The snow thickened outside. Day 61 arrived without fanfare. I woke to the smell of pancakes and bacon. Claire was at the stove in the same flannel, humming something old, maybe Ella Fitzgerald. The suitcase was gone from the closet. Her books had migrated to my shelf spines, mixed with my design magazines. Smokey's food bowl now had a permanent spot by the fridge. I patted in poured coffee into the blue mug, no tea today. She slid a plate across pancakes, stacked high bacon crisp aside of her strawberry jam. Morning, she said. Morning. I took the plate, sat at the table. She joined me, legs crossed under her. Snow's sticking, I said. Means the lavender will have to wait. I smiled. Guess I lost. She buttered a pancake, thoughtful. We both did. We ate in comfortable quiet. Outside, the yard was white and untouched. Inside, the radiator clanked, the cat snored, the coffee cooled. Later, I found her on the back porch, wrapped in my coat, watching the snow settle on the rosemary pots. I stepped behind her, hands in my pockets. How long are you staying? I asked. She didn't turn. Until Smokey's officially cleared of all charges. I laughed. That cat's guilty as hell. Exactly. She leaned back just enough that her shoulder brushed my chest. Looks like I'm here for good. I slipped my arms around her waist, slow testing. She settled against me like she'd always belonged there. Snow kept falling. The porch light flickered on automatically as dusk crept in. Neither of us moved to go inside. That night, I opened my laptop again. The stuck render loaded. I deleted the temporary walls, opened the light sources, let the windows flood the room with late afternoon sun. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. I saved the file, home, final. Claire found me at midnight, still at the table. She placed a fresh mug beside me, tea this time. Bed, she said, in a minute. She rested her hands on my shoulders, thumbs pressing the knots I hadn't noticed. Jace. Yeah, leave the light on. I closed the laptop, took her hand. We left the kitchen light burning a small glow against the snow outside. Smokey followed us down the hall, tail high. The spare room door stayed open. The suitcase stayed empty. Some bets you don't win. Some you don't want to.